is also, just so everyone's aware, this presentation is going to be recorded. Okay, without further ado, I think we can begin. Um, Welcome everyone to the Chagrin River Watershed Partners Speaker Series presentation with Dr. Eric Soehnlen about highlights from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. My name is Maggie. I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. And before we begin, I'd like to just give you some background on CRWP and the speaker series. So Chagrin River Watershed Partners was formed, sorry, let me actually start with the speaker series. CRWP hosts these webinars each winter by partnering with environmental professionals to engage and educate other interested professionals and members of the community about environmental protection. Again, this presentation is being recorded and it will eventually be on our YouTube, and I'll send out a follow-up link to the attendees so you can see that, as well as a short survey. Before this formal presentation, again, I'm just going to give some background. Um, so the Chagrin River Watershed is a high-quality watershed designated by miles of state scenic river and then cold water streams, and we also have some brook trout. But it is impacted by development activities which increase flooding, erosion, and water quality problems. Over 20 years ago, 16 communities formed the Chagrin River Watershed Partners to pool knowledge and resources to cost-effectively keep the watershed healthy as communities grow. Today, the partner's 35 members represent over 91% of the watershed in Cuyahoga, Geauga, Lake, and Portage counties. Here's a list of CRWP's current member communities. You can see a whole bunch of them on there. CRWP is a nonprofit organization, again, formed in 1996 by watershed communities and park districts. CRWP is supported by member dues, grants, and donations. We provide technical assistance on land use planning to minimize flooding, erosion, and water quality issues, and focus on cost-effective solutions for communities and landowners. We also co-lead the Central Lake Erie Basin Collaborative, a regional partnership for healthy watersheds. Through this network, we provide technical support for watershed organizations all across Northeast Ohio. Here's a summary of CRWP's wide variety of work. Our watershed scale work benefits all of our members and includes watershed planning, research, plus developing and updating model watershed protection codes. In addition to watershed scale work, CRWP collaborates with members on grant writing, helps communities adopt and implement codes, provides recommendations for development plans, and supports compliance with stormwater requirements, and educates and empowers people to steward watersheds and tackle erosion and stormwater challenges. Excuse me. Most of our work with our members is supported through grants and service agreements secured by CRWP or members with CRWP's assistance or contracts with members. We are thankful to those that support our work. Without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Thank you for bearing with me there. Sorry, I have so many tabs open. Okay, so today I'm super excited about CRWP's partnership with Dr. Eric Soehnlen. He's a field biologist with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. Dr. Eric Soehnlen earned his PhD in biological chemistry from Kent State University, has over a decade of experience leading the sewer district's beach monitoring program, and enjoys teaching part-time as a professor of chemistry at Kent's, oh, excuse me, let me admit some people here. So sorry. And he enjoys teaching part-time as a professor of chemistry at the Kent State University Regional Academic Center in Twinsburg. Excuse me there. In this presentation, Dr. Eric Soehnlen will discuss highlights about the Sewer District's project Clean Lake Combined Sewer Overflow Control, surface water monitoring, their member community infrastructure grant programs, and improvements made by the Sewer District in protecting water quality throughout the Chagrin River watershed. If you have questions, please feel free to type any as we go into the chat box on your screen, and we'll cover them in the middle and then some towards the end with a Q&A. So with that, Thank you all for bearing with me, and thank you, Dr. Eric Soehnlen, for this presentation whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Maggie. I want to thank Maggie for the invitation to share our work with you. I'm going to scroll right down to my presentation overview here and just talk about what all I'm going to cover today. So Maggie reached out to me and asked me if I could talk about E. coli in surface waters in our region, in the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer Districts, or I'm just going to use our acronym NEORSD because it's a mouthful. But the NEORSD's role in trying to combat E. coli problems or E. coli contamination in our surface waters. And so I'm going to split my talk up into kind of two big sections, and I'll take some questions in the middle, but I want to give like a general overview of some of our big major projects that we have going on. I'm going to start by talking about who we are, the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District's history, which is really tied into the history of water quality problems in Ohio and across the United States, actually. And then I want to dive into some things that I learned when I started working at the sewer district, which I think the general public are not aware of, which are the different types of sewers and their environmental impact. So sewers, I call them like our invisible or unseen infrastructure. A lot of people don't realize the problems that are going on in our sewers. You flush the toilet, it goes down the drain, you assume it goes where it's supposed to be going. It's not like if there's a telephone line down, you can see that, you're going to call and get that fixed. So it's an invisible piece of infrastructure, and a lot of folks just aren't aware of the issues going on and the things and the work that's being done to fix those issues. So I want to share some of that with you. Once I've given some educational background on the types of sewers, we can dive into like Project Clean Lake, which is part of our US EPA consent decree to remove combined sewer overflows in our service area. And then I want to talk about how we're helping our member communities fix the problems in their local sewers through our member community infrastructure program. So I'll stop there and take some questions once I get done with that point. And then if we have some time, I want to dive into some specific studies. I'll give you a little introduction to my department and the work that we do to help these major projects. So we do all of the stream monitoring and monitor industries in our area to try to direct major projects and to make sure that our major projects are actually having a benefit in our region. So I like to start with a fun little quiz. I don't know if you guys can put this in. I'm assuming everybody that comes to a watershed teams, group meeting is going to know the answer to this question. But do many of you feel like you confidently know the answer to this question? So when was the last Cuyahoga River fire? And most of us probably know this is a trick question, right? So there were many Cuyahoga River fires. This was a long ongoing problem, and it wasn't just in Ohio. It wasn't just the Cuyahoga River. So many rivers were just declared open sewers. Industries could dump whatever they wanted to into the river, and it was a giant mess. And so we'll show you some of the videos or some of the footage of the giant messes that we had on the Cuyahoga River. So this is a picture of the Cuyahoga River fire of 1948. So we've got soaked, oily rags, woody debris, just garbage in general, a lot of oils and solvents burning on the river. This is the fire department at the time trying to protect this bridge or protect their infrastructure during the 1949 fire. Again, trying to protect infrastructure in 51. This is the 1969 fire is kind of like the one that sparked the national, I guess, outrage or environmental movement that resulted in the passage of the Clean Water Act of 1972, but they actually used this 1952 picture in the Time magazine article. So it was just a really good picture. This was the most destructive of the fires on the Cuyahoga River, the 1952 fire. So the sewer district and the Clean Water Act was sort of born out of the ashes of those fires. So those fires sparked an environmental movement in the United States. The Clean Water Act of 1972 was passed. In that same year, the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District was created by a court order by a judge named George J. McGonigal, and our downtown administrative office is named after him. So that's our GJM facility after his name. Our service area, we serve 63 different communities. And at the time we were formed, it was the worry was that those communities wouldn't be able to come together in a comprehensive way to handle the massive water quality problems that we had here in Northeast Ohio. So we needed one governing entity to kind of handle, and we were created to handle both stormwater and sanitary sewage. So we oversee both of those things in our service area. So our service area, if you think of it in terms of like watersheds, we span from the Rocky River on our west side, and then of course we've got the Cuyahoga River and its tributaries in the middle. And then on our east side, we've got sections of the Chagrin River and a lot of our little Lake Erie, we call Lake Erie direct tributaries like Euclid Creek, Dugway Brook, Doan Brook, all of those in our northeast side of our service area. So just a few little facts about the sewer district. Like I said, we serve 63 different municipalities, including the city of Cleveland. We're technically like a special district of the state of Ohio, so an independent political subdivision of the state of Ohio. So we're a state entity, and we're governed by a board of 7 trustees that are made up of government members from our member communities. So we're a large employer in the state of Ohio. We have almost 800 people working for us. We have 3 huge wastewater treatment plants. So we're one of the largest sewer districts in the United States, and some of our wastewater treatment plants are some of the largest plants of their kind in the United States. So we've got some amazing infrastructure here. This map up in the top right, the service area in this map may be slightly dated, but I wanted to show this just so you could get a general idea of where our wastewater treatment plants are and where our big giant interceptor sewers are. So interceptor sewers are owned and operated by the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. When you flush your toilet or use your sink, that flows to your local sewer. And so that's owned and operated by your local municipality, and we are helping them fix those problems through our member community infrastructure program, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But we handle all of the problems in those major interceptor sewers. So the local sewers flow to those interceptor sewers, which flow to one of our 3 wastewater treatment plants. We cleverly named them by where they're located. We've got Westerly on the west side near Edgewater Beach. We've got Southerly south of Cleveland. That's located along the Cuyahoga River close to Grant Avenue. You can see it from 77. I work in our Environmental Maintenance Service Center, which is up top the hill from the Southerly wastewater treatment plant. And then over on the east side, near Euclid and Brattonall, we've got our Easterly wastewater treatment plant there. And that's our oldest wastewater treatment plant in Cleveland. Of course, it's been massively updated, but that land there where that sits on has been used for wastewater treatment for a very long time. So we operate over 489 miles of rivers, streams, culverts, 341 miles of these large interceptor sewers in our service area. So it's a huge undertaking. These are just some photos of our major facilities. So left to right here, we've got Southerly, which, as I said, one of the biggest wastewater treatment, treats 120 million gallons a day during dry weather. I think the capacity totally is over 600 million gallons a day. So it's an amazing wastewater treatment plant. I think our Westerly wastewater treatment plant is pretty cool because it can treat a huge amount of volume for the amount of acreage that it's on. So it's got these big trickling filters. So they're kind of built up instead of out with Westerly, which I think is really cool. And our Easterly wastewater treatment plant in the middle, our Environmental Maintenance Service Center where I work and where our lab is located off of 49th Street, and then our GJM facility. I wanted to toss this up because this just has some fun facts. I know it's a super busy slide, but there's a couple things I want to point out. So I want to point out the number of district manholes. So if you think of like those manholes in the street, those metal covers that you see in the street, we have over 5,000 monitoring points. Just to give you the idea of like how huge this is. Points where we could lift that up to inspect the sewer or take samples or do work that we need to do. And that's not counting all the local stuff. So all the local stuff, then you're exponentially more manholes to inspect and things along those lines. One of the other things I want to point out that's on this slide are these things called, if you see that where it says 112 NPDES CSO permit points. So right now we have a lot of programs where we're cleaning up mistakes of past generations. So that NPDES stands for National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and the CSO is Combined Sewer Overflows. And so we have 112 points where at one point in time, our forefathers or our previous generations decided to engineer points where sewage went straight to the rivers and streams because it was better than having it back up into people's basements. So that was literally a decision that was made back in the early to mid 1900s, and we are working to clean that up now. So that's fallen to our generation to clean up. In order to really describe what's going on there, I want to give a little bit of education about the different types of sewers first. So I've got a map on the right just to show you like one particular region, and each different color is a different type of local sanitary sewer layout. So these are the sanitary sewers that the cities own. And the type of sewer that you might find is going to depend on when it was built. You know, what kind of engineering were they using when it was built? So I already described like the major interceptor sewers or our big sewers that carry everything away from the locals. Your locals can have several different layouts. You can have a combined sewer. That's a sewer where both the sanitary sewage, when you flush your toilet, and the rainwater, what might go down your gutters or go down the street gutters, are going to the same pipe. That made sense historically, long ago, to have them both go to the same pipe because the streets were filthy. So it made sense to send all of that to a wastewater treatment plant. But the people that build those did not foresee how much the city would grow, and they did not foresee how much impervious surface we would put down. So to define impervious surface, that's things like parking lots, pavements, driveways, your rooftops. So when you have impervious surface, all of that is going to go to the stormwater infrastructure rapidly. The rainwater is going to hit it. It's going to fill up the pipes rapidly instead of percolating slowly into the ground and becoming groundwater and slowly making its way to a river or stream to flow back out to Lake Erie as it would naturally. So we've developed a lot more impervious surface than we used to have. And what happened historically was the pipes were undersized for that amount of impervious surface that we developed. And so these pipes would overflow and back up into people's basements. So you had sanitary sewage in folks' basements. The early 1900s to mid 1900s fix for that was to build these huge combined sewer overflow pipes to just take that untreated wastewater out to the river and stream and out to Lake Erie. So right now we are working diligently to clean that up. At one point in time, way back when, I think the estimate there was like 9 billion gallons of untreated mixed sanitary sewage and stormwater flow was going out to Lake Erie and our tributaries a year. So 9 billion gallons. To give you an idea of how much that is, we treat about 87 billion gallons a year. So it was, you know, roughly over 10% of what we treat going out to the river untreated or going out to Lake Erie untreated. And we're capturing that now. So those are combined sewers, and they are a major problem. We're addressing those through Project Clean Lake, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Even if you separate the two, so you've got a separate sanitary sewer and a storm sewer in different pipes now, you can have additional problems there because there's different ways you could build that. So there's two ways you can do that. One way to save money in the history was to just dig one ditch and put both pipes in the same ditch. We now know that's problematic. So that's what we call a common trench separate sewer. So when you've got both pipes in the same ditch, that's going to cause problems. And I've got some slides to show you what kind of problems that could cause. The best way to do it is a separate trench. And that's how new sewers are built today. So they've got maybe down the middle of the street, they've got their sanitary sewer. And then on the sides, they've got the storm sewer lines. So that's the best configuration. We'd like to see all things move to that, but that's a huge undertaking. So these are our worst players in terms of the common trench sewers. These are called our over-under invert plate sewers. So what you've got here is the sanitary sewer pipe is underneath the storm sewer and it's directly underneath the storm sewer. So if you have to inspect this, you lift the manhole cover in the street and you look down and you're looking into the storm sewer. And then you've got what's called a metal invert plate. So there's a metal plate that's supposed to keep the storm water from going into that sanitary sewer. It does not always do that. So that metal plate's going to rust. It's not going to have a good seal on there. You're going to get storm water in your sanitary sewer. It's going to overwhelm that sanitary sewer, resulting in basement backups or resulting in a downstream plate to get blown out. And now you've got full mixing. Or if that sanitary sewer gets blocked, then it's going to blow out one of those plates upstream. And all of a sudden your sanitary sewage is flowing into your storm sewer and going out to your river and stream. During wet weather, these things are notorious for mixing. So we'll see in a lot of our urban streams, we have high E. coli during rain events. And it's because of these common trench sewers, for the most part, combined sewer overflows in some regions and these common trench sewers. Here are some other configurations of common trench sewers that are problematic, although not quite as problematic as that over under. That's kind of our worst player. You've got dividing wall. where they're kind of like open trenches in part of them. So if one of them were to get blocked, the flow could jump over that dividing wall and get into the other sewer. So you can get mixing that way. And then you can just get mixing because the sewers are aging. So for example, this common standard manhole, you've got two different manhole access points. The pipes are separate. They shouldn't be able to bleed together. Technically, there may be some emergency overflow points engineered in there where they could in the case of a blockage so it doesn't get backed up into somebody's basement. But even then, if they've got minimal points to spill over time, those pipes are going to crack, the ground's going to shift. You're going to have what's called inflow and infiltration, or as we call it in the business, I&I. So you're going to have just during wet weather, the groundwater is saturated, the stuff's going to contaminate the storm sewer system, and you're going to have elevated E. coli in your stream downstream of your storm sewer. So as I said, those are the major types of sewers and their environmental impact. I want to talk about, all the big ones in terms of E. coli contamination to streams. You've got, as we said, and this isn't necessarily in order of like the largest contributor. That's going to depend on the watershed. So it depends on the engineering, depends on what sort of infrastructure is in that region. But combined sewer overflows, obviously, if you're dumping raw sewage into the stream, you're going to have elevated E. coli. Sanitary sewer overflows are kind of when like a sanitary sewer gets blocked on the local side and that spills over in the storm. So we'll call that a sanitary sewer overflow. And then you've got what I call that inflow and infiltration. You also have urban runoff. So there's urban wildlife. You've got seagulls. So if you've got a bunch of seagulls in a parking lot and there's, animal feces, when it rains, that E. coli is going to go down the storm sewer and out to the environment. And you've got other animal sources like our domestic animals, or other wildlife. We know our raccoons love to live in storm sewers. We do investigations to trace E. coli in storm sewers, and we'll pop the manhole cover open. There'll be little raccoon prints everywhere. So it's like, they're going to the bathroom in the storm sewer. So that's all going out to the environment. I've got a picture of the test that we use. That's called the co-alert test on the right there. And it's a pretty cool test. So there's like a little dye in there that the bacteria have an enzyme that chew it up and then it lights up. So if the bacteria are present, the wells light up and we can figure out how concentrated were the E. coli in that sample. So I mentioned what a combined sewer overflow is, and the sewer district had already started working on combating combined sewer overflows in our region before we entered into this thing called our consent decree with the US EPA, which we've dubbed Project Clean Lake. At the time that we entered the consent decree with the United States EPA, which is really just like a schedule, and we are scheduling how we're going to remove combined combined sewer overflows. We started that in 2012, that process of the consent decree. We were at about 4.5 billion gallons a year. So we're going to get down to less than 95% of that at the end of this project. We're going to invest $3 billion to do this. It's not cheap to do this. So we've got to build these giant underground storage tunnels to capture all of this volume. It's not cheap to capture 4.5 billion gallons of flow. We're going to build these giant underground storage tunnels for the most part, or work on other projects to try to remove stormwater from the combined sewers in the first place, so that they wouldn't be overflowing in the first place. So there are a few different ways that we tackle these projects. Right now, we've decreased things by about 1.7 billion gallons currently. And just to give you an idea of what a massive undertaking this is, there was 52 huge engineering projects to get this done. We have 20 active projects ongoing and 7 future projects to get us down to that point where we've reduced our combined sewer overflow footprint by more than 95%. These things are amazing. So we have these giant underground storage tunnels, and because Americans will do anything to not use the metric system, I have a human being in here for scale. And so we've got, you can just see how huge this tunnel boring machine is. So some of our tunnels are between, I think, 24 to 30 feet wide. I know the Euclid Creek tunnel is 24 feet wide and up to 3 miles long. So we have these huge underground storage tunnels that are 200 feet underground. Those combined sewer overflow pipes get piped into these. So rather than discharging that flow to the environment, it goes into these giant underground storage tunnels during wet weather. And then during dry weather, after the rain event stops and the wastewater treatment plants are no longer overwhelmed, We have these dewatering pump stations with these huge pumps, and they pump that back out into our collection system to get back to the wastewater treatment plant so that we can treat that and return it to Lake Erie or to the Cuyahoga River, which is where our southerly plant discharges to. Just to give you a map of like how huge these projects are, this is the Euclid Creek Tunnel. So as of 2019, we do not have any combined sewer overflow discharges to Euclid Creek now. And it also removed many combined sewer overflow discharges along the Lake Erie shoreline on the east side there. So this is, I just looked up the facts on this one. I thought when I had originally read this, the original design said 2.7 miles, but I looked it up, it's supposed to be 18,000 feet, so that's 3.4 miles. And it's 24 feet wide, so that's an amazing underground storage tunnel. It goes out under Lake Erie and then back around into Brattonall. It's about 200 feet underground at some places. This was our most recently completed one, to my knowledge. This is our westerly storage tunnel. And this got rid of one that I just thought was amazing to get rid of. There's this huge CSO called CSO 80, and I'll show you a picture of it, that discharges just an enormous amount of combined sewage, or used to discharge an enormous amount of combined sewage to the Cuyahoga River. And we've eliminated that in 2024. And I'm really excited. We're just now starting to pour over that data. So I'm really excited to see what we're going to find when we get the CSO data for 2024, that report back, and look at we did a huge study on the Cuyahoga River this year. So we're in the process of writing that report right now. But this is that CSO 080, and you can kind of see that thing that looks like a waterfall. That's the CSO going off. And there's like a wall there that it's cascading over. That's about 3 feet tall, just to give you an idea of scale there. So this is like a huge river of sewage when it's going off. And it's no longer going to go off. So we captured this in 2024. This used to overflow about 80 times a year for a total of 330 million gallons a year. Just to give you an idea, our southerly wastewater treatment plant treats 120 million gallons a year a day. So this would be like turning off the southerly wastewater treatment plant for 2.5 days. So we've captured an additional 2.5 days of operation time at the southerly wastewater treatment plant, which is sweet. Really excited about that. So that's about all I had for just a summary of our combined sewer overflow program. And I want to dive into how we're helping out local communities and some of the problems that you can see in local collection systems. So we don't own and operate the local collection systems, but everyone that discharges to them is a ratepayer of ours. And so we assist the communities in identifying problems to make sure that your sewage is getting to us and that it's getting treated. So we have a whole illicit discharge detection and elimination program. We contract with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. They go out and sample all of our storm sewers in our service area, and we get that E. coli data. And so we can go out and say, oh, this during dry weather, when there shouldn't be any stormwater flow, there's flow at this outfall and it's got E. coli in it. So we've got a problem. So we're going to go out there and check that out. So this is an example on Big Creek in Parma. This is under Pearl and York Road. And this was one where there's a mix of things going on here. So you've got old infrastructure, old failing local sewers, but there was also a big cross connection. There was actually a restaurant tied in improperly upstream. So you can see what appears to be white flow coming out of there. That's not white flow, that's bacterial film. That's a really gross bacterial growth on that. And that's toilet paper at the bottom of the outfall. So that's a storm sewer, so that should not be happening. So when our investigators get out there and check that out, we're going to start tracing the local system. This is a different local system. I want to show you just an idea of how complicated these maps can be. So this is a sewer map, and every one of those little circles you're seeing, that's a manhole cover in a street. So we've got to go out there and start lifting manhole covers and taking samples and try to trace this backwards in the system. So this is one out in Rocky River that I used to work on back when I first started in like 2013, 2014. But what you do is you go out and you start looking at the intersections where the sewers come together and flow together. And you start taking samples and you trace it back until you no longer see that dry weather flow, no longer see that high E. coli. Then you work with the city to do some dye tests to make sure everything's tied in properly. We're going to work with the city to see, is there anything, is the infrastructure failing? Do we have those over-under sewers and an invert plate missing? What's going on? And then we're going to, once we identify the problem, we're going to turn that over to the city to fix it. But oftentimes, the local municipality, they weren't expecting that. They don't have it budgeted to fix these major problems all the time when we find these problems. So we want to be able to get these problems fixed. And so we're going to direct some of our stormwater money to help these communities fix these problems. And so we developed this member community infrastructure program. So just to give you an idea of how awesome this program is, we're awarding $25 million this year. This comes out of our stormwater fees to help fund 27 projects in 20 different communities to do a variety of different sewer improvement projects. Anything from getting rid of that inflow and infiltration, correcting illicit discharges and sanitary sewer overflows. If you still got people with septic systems and those septic systems are failing, building a new sewer so that we can get rid of those septic systems and get them in our collection system. Local sewer system improvement, and we also we will fund any project where they can remove stormwater from those combined sewers so we don't have so many combined sewer overflows. And of course, those ones that I'd like to see totally eradicated, those over and under sewers. So we're funding these projects, helping the local communities get the money to fix these projects. So with that, that was pretty much where I'd like to take just like a little pause and answer any questions that I've talked about, like our big projects that are going on and the big things that we're doing to try to remove E. coli from our watersheds. And the next thing I want to talk about is my department and some of our specific studies. So this is a Chagrin River Watersheds meeting, so I want to talk about our Chagrin River study that we did recently. And I want to talk about our beach monitoring program a little bit, if we have time. But I've got time for a few questions if anyone has any questions. I don't have the chat up, so Maggie, if you wouldn't mind reading any questions that come through.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, we have at least one question right now, and then if anyone else, if you have any, please type them in. But so one question, there was the one slide that showed the three plants. Are Bentleyville and Soehnlen not included in the regional sewer district sewer system?
I don't know about Bentleyville at all, but I know that Soehnlen has its own wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, gotcha.
And there are places where our stormwater program, people are, their sewage goes to a different place, so that our stormwater map and our sewage treatment map don't always perfectly overlap. So people could pay a stormwater fee to us, but not a sewage fee to us in some places. And again,
Okay.
that's kind of outside of my area of expertise. But it has to do with how things are piped together. And a lot of that has to do with geography and how things flow downhill.
Okay,
So.
gotcha. Thank you. I think that answers that one, and that's the only one I see currently. So unless anyone else has one that pops up.
Awesome. Well, I'll just keep on steamrolling ahead here. But so I want to talk a little bit about my department and the work that we do, and then I'll get into some specifics. This is kind of the fun end for me. And so with all those major projects, a lot of my role is to do the environmental monitoring upstream and downstream of those projects in our watershed, in our watersheds in our service area, to make sure that the work we're doing is actually having a positive environmental impact. So that's a lot of the work that I do. But I'm in a department that does a wide variety of work, so I just wanted to introduce some of the different groups in that department real quick. So I work for our water quality and industrial surveillance department. So we have a lot of people that work in this department. And it's a pretty professionally diverse department. We have a lot of people with different backgrounds. So we do everything from industrial surveillance, where we've got a group that goes around to industries to make sure that they're not discharging anything nasty that would negatively influence the wastewater treatment plant or that would pass through the wastewater treatment plant untreated. So like toxic heavy metals, organic pesticides, and nasty things that we don't want to see in our wastewater flows, are things that would be harmful to the collection system. We have local limits that are enforced by our industrial investigators that go out and monitor industries in our service area. I'm on the opposite end. I'm an environmental monitoring specialist, so I'm a field biologist. So I'm on the opposite end, making sure that everything that we're discharging is safe for the environment. So we do environmental sampling, and I'll go into more detail of that a little bit. We also have a business group that you could call, like say you have a water leak and you need a rate adjustment or something like that. They do those sorts of investigations. They also look at our industries discharging really extra high strength waste. And so do we need to charge them more so we're not, so that we're fair to our other ratepayers? We all are trained in emergency response. So I'm a hazmat technician. So we can show up with the firefighters and help if there's a chemical spill to one of our waterways, or if there's a chemical spill in our collection system that's going to go to one of our wastewater treatment plants, we can go out, help trace that, remediate that, and assist the firefighters with the emergency response on major accidents and incidents. We also have a pollution prevention group that does that illicit discharge work that I was discussing there, where we trace things in the sewer. And they also handle mercury discharges, because we've got an eye on mercury. If there's a mercury spill or any companies that use that, they cover that in our pollution prevention group. In a nutshell, what my department does is they keep the left picture out of the right picture. That's essentially what we do in a nutshell. And not that we don't want the left picture, we need our industry, right? We need our economy to roll. So there's nothing wrong with our left picture. We just don't want it in the right picture. So that's our goal. We want strong, healthy industries in Northeast Ohio. We want to make sure that our industries are meeting their permit limits. We want to make sure that our industries are not negatively impacting our environmental resources. So my job as a field biologist is to conduct these environmental assessments in our watershed, and we really look at four major things. So we look at water chemistry, which bacteriological work falls under that. So we're going to go out once a week for 5 weeks in the study plan area and collect a water chemistry sample for a variety of parameters. So we'll get 5 samples, and we can get an average or a geomean out of that, and we compare that to water quality standards that are set by the Ohio EPA and the US EPA to see, is this water body meeting its water quality standards in terms of chemical pollutants. Now, those are all snapshots. Water chemistry, you're going out and you're taking a grab sample. So you all know the streams are not homogeneous. And if somebody discharged something 2 days ago, it's already to Lake Erie. I'm not going to see it. So the state of Ohio really was a leader in developing another method to test for water quality, which is to use biological indicators. So we use fish and macroinvertebrate, which is the fancy word for bugs that live in rivers and streams. We use those communities as an indication of how clean the water is. So there are canaries in the coal mine. So we do fish surveys and bug surveys. We collect data on how many of each species are present, and we plug those into these formulas called the Index of Biotic Integrity for fish and the ICI, the index, or the Invertebrate Community Index for bugs. And that gives us a numerical score that tells us how clean or how healthy that waterway is based on the fish or bug population. And then up above that, I've also got habitat, which is a huge part of the puzzle as a scientist. Because if the habitat isn't present, then you don't necessarily have a water quality issue if your fish or bugs aren't present, right? They've got to have sufficient habitat. So habitat is another thing that we look at just to well round out puzzles. So we've got all the pieces. And so once we do these investigations, we can then help decide, yes, there's a water quality issue in this region, and we need to move forward with looking into solutions in this region to try to improve water quality. Or we'll say, hey, water quality in this watershed is excellent, and we want to keep it that way. So let's move forward to try to put in necessary measures to keep it that way. So this is just an example of like our water chemistry gear. It's pretty simple. We go out with a bunch of bottles, different preservatives, depending on what we're measuring. We look at, like I said, toxic heavy metals, bacteria, nutrients, things along those lines, and drop those off to our amazing analytical services group. We've got an awesome lab here, and they get our results back, and we can trust those results. They're laboratory, they're an accredited laboratory, and without them, I'd be lost. I wouldn't be able to get anything done. This is an example of like some of the macroinvertebrates that we might find. These are the little guys that live under the rocks. If you're ever out walking in the river or stream, you're probably squishing them, but they're all out there. So we've got in the top left, we've got an example of caddisflies. This is a really diverse group. And these guys will start to disappear if you get pollution. Top right, we've got stoneflies. These are extremely pollution sensitive. We almost never see them in our service area. There's a couple of like really pristine streams where you will see these guys. They really start to disappear quickly with any amount of human influence. Bottom right, we've got an example of mayflies. That's, again, a very diverse group. So we want to see a lot of species diversity. So the more species of these we find, the better. And then this bottom left guy, I just think they're cool. This is another, it's a good water quality indicator bug, but it looks like a little horseshoe crab, but that's a little tiny beetle, and they're usually about 1 centimeter long. So that's called a water penny. And so that's an aquatic beetle. So this is how we do our bug sampling. We've got these bug traps that we put out there. They're called, they're named after the people that invented them. Two guys, their last names were Hester and Dendy. So these are the Hester Dendy apparatuses. So they're what we call an artificial substrate sampler. The substrate would be like the rocks and stuff on the bottom of the river. So these mimic the gaps between the rocks and the bottom of the river. So we install these for a period of 6 weeks in our stream in typically pretty good, moderately fast flowing water. We come back 6 weeks later and collect these, and we ship them to an awesome guy that does our macroinvertebrate identification for us, Bert Remley, with Third Rock Consultants down in Kentucky, because it's a really difficult job to do all of this identification, and Bert just IDs bugs all day long. So he's awesome at it. So we use a contractor for that. And then we get those results back and plug them in. So we also do what's called a qualitative sample. Outside of that sampler, we also pick up rocks and look at like the margin habitat along the sides of the stream, and we use nets and we catch more bugs to try to figure out across the whole stretch of stream, not just where we had that trap, how many species do we have. For fishing, we're not out there with the line and a reel, we cheat. We use electrofishing. So this is an electrofishing boat. We have what we call a long line method too that we can do in smaller streams if we can't fit a boat on. But essentially, we're going to use a pulsed electric current to temporarily stun the fish. So if you see that big white tank on that boat, that's a live well. We're pumping fresh water into that live well. And we've got a boat driver and a netter. And the netter's got a little pedal, and he can step on that pedal, and it's going to put a pulsed electric current into the water. So those metal things hanging down off the front there, those are going to act as the anode, and the boat acts as a cathode. There's an electric generator on the boat. And so you're going to create like an electric field, and the fish are going to be temporarily stunned. We net them all up. We put them in that live well. After we do the stretch of stream, we pull over, and we've got these amazing field biologists that can identify any fish in the state of Ohio just by looking at it. And I can't do that. They're awesome. I've tried to help them out. I do pretty good until we get to the little minnows and shiners. And I'm like, everyone looks like a little tiny silverfish. Please help me. But our fish guys are amazing. I'll show you some photos of those guys. This is John Rhodes, my manager, and Seth Hodem years ago. He's my supervisor. So these guys are all also awesome biologists, but they've taken on more administrative roles here. Seth still gets out with us. They still get out with us on occasion, and we appreciate their insight when they get out with us. We got Mark Madison here. This is one of our amazing fish biologists. I don't have pictures of the whole group, but I've got Mark there, and this is Justin Tellep. So these are our two guys that we're our only two guys that were part of the quality data collector program with the Ohio EPA, but we just got two new people that just got their certification. So we've got 4 fully certified fish biologists now, and we're going to have 3 certified macroinvertebrate biologists now. So we've got an awesome team. Some highlights on the Cuyahoga River, really exciting news. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services is releasing freshwater sturgeon. So this was a pollution sensitive species of fish. It was overfished essentially, but it was totally gone from our region. So we're trying to bring this back. Water quality has improved on the Cuyahoga River to the point where we're trying to bring back some of these pollution sensitive species that just aren't in our region anymore. And then the National Parks Service, Ryan Trimboth with the National Park Service is spearheading a movement to bring back the freshwater mussel, which is I love freshwater mussels. I'm a huge freshwater mussel. So this is a species, this is the most threatened group of animals in the United States in terms of the percent of species that are endangered or threatened. And so the water quality has improved to the point where we're working with some fisheries, and we're going to have these bred, and we're going to try to reintroduce the freshwater mussel species that were wiped out of the Cuyahoga River back into the Cuyahoga River. So this is all really exciting news. And I've played a very small role in this project, but I've been very thankful to Ryan for bringing me on the role I've played. Since this is a Chagrin River Watersheds meeting, I thought I should talk about the Chagrin River for a minute, probably, right? I want to give you an example of like what one of our studies looks like. So this was in 2021. We went back out to the Chagrin River. This was after some major infrastructure changes. And so this was kind of like a post-improvement monitoring project. So we had 3 sites along the Chagrin River main branch, and then we also had 2 sites on the tributaries that were downstream of where there used to be some failing local wastewater treatment plants that were negatively impacting those streams. So the fish and bug and water chemistry, or fish and bug communities and the water chemistry of those streams were all negatively impacted by those, the Creekside and the Jackson Valley wastewater treatment plant there. And so I'll show you what our results were in 2021. Now, these are E. coli results. So we had kind of a rainy year that year. Of the 5 samples we grabbed, 3 of them were wet weather. You can see the little asterisk next to the date there. So you can see, even though we consider the Chagrin River to be one of our more pristine streams in our service area, during wet weather, we still have some E. coli issues out there. And that's due to the range of factors that we talked about earlier. We were talking about those different types of sewers and how they can negatively impact E. coli or contribute to E. coli in our service area. So during wet weather, we still have some E. coli issues out there. It's along the Chagrin River main branch and in the tributaries as well. So the number we like to see out there is for an individual grab below 410 is considered to be good. For our beaches, we get a little more conservative and it's 235. And then if we're looking at like the average, we want to be below 126. So both the average, and again, taken to consideration, this is 5 samples. So this isn't necessarily representative of the conditions throughout the year. It happened that 3 of our 5 samples were during wet weather. But this identified that we got wet weather problems out there. These are our habitat scores. So if our habitat scores are good, we're going to expect that our fish and bug scores are going to be good. And so we can see all of our habitat scores were between good and excellent out there, which is exactly what we're looking for. They're all above our targets. Forgive me for this one not being in a graph form. I just yanked this out. There wasn't a graph in the report. I just yanked this real fast. So the far right, just focus on that far right column where everything is good and excellent. These are our bug scores. So the bug scores, good to excellent. We had improvement after in Pepperlouse Creek and Wiley Creek. After removing those wastewater treatment plants, the bugs were able to return, and now we're back in alignment with the warm water habitat standards set by the EPA. But here's our fish now. So what's going on here? So our main branch looks good, but we did not see an improvement in the fish community biology in Pepperlouse and Wiley Creek. And why is that? The answer is fish have a little harder time getting upstream if there's something like a waterfall in the way or a dam in the way. So we looked into it, and there's actually in Pepperlouse Creek and Wiley Creek, there's some natural waterfalls. I can't recall if there's a little dam on one of them or not, or if there are natural waterfalls. But there's a fish barrier on both of these streams. And so our fish crew actually has a program to address this. What happened was the bugs were able to get back because the bugs can fly during part of their lifespan. So they're able to repopulate. But it would take the fish, thousands of years of of something eroding away or them being able to get a passage up to get back to where they need to be upstream there. And so we've got a program called our Fish Translocation Program that is spearheaded by Justin Tellep with the sewer district. He's done work on Plum Creek, and he's doing work in Tinkers Creek right now to move fish upstream of the dam. If the water quality is back in alignment with water quality standards, we're going to try to help the aquatic ecosystem get it back to where it was before human beings messed it up. So they're doing electrofishing downstream of the barrier and collecting fish in that watershed, moving them back upstream and tagging them. And so there were species that we were missing upstream that were tagged, and Justin years later has found both his tagged ones and untagged ones of those species, meaning they're successfully breeding. So that's really exciting news. So we're trying to restore the biological diversity upstream of these fish barriers back to what it was before we messed it up as humans. So the last thing I'll talk about, and I've been kind of long-winded today and I'm talking a lot, but I'm wrapping up here, is our beach monitoring program. And I just want to bring this up because it's such an awesome public service, and I've been a part of it since 2006, believe it or not. So I started here as an intern in 2006 and 2007, and I went back and did my PhD. And then I wanted to get back into environmental stuff. I wasn't happy doing what I was doing with the doctorate, and saw this job and came back and ended up back in beaches. So my career went full circle. It was kind of cool. So I've done a lot of work on the beach program. I've handed this off recently, so we've got other people that are going to take this over in future years. But I spent about 10 years doing kind of helping Seth oversee the beach program, or working with our interns to do the sampling. So we've got kind of 4 big sampling points on our beach monitoring program. On our west side, we've got Edgewater Beach, very popular beach. And on the east side, we've got Euclid and Villa Angela Beach, those have different names because they were historically owned by different entities. So now it's all owned by the Cleveland Metro Parks. And so we go out and sample at those places. And we also sample at Euclid Creek because you're going to see Euclid Creek is kind of a problematic urban stream. We have a lot of those common trench sewer problems. So there's a lot of elevated E. coli in Euclid Creek, and that's going to negatively impact our numbers at Villa Angela and Euclid Beach. We've removed all the combined sewer overflow from Euclid Creek. And now the next step is to try to work with the communities to help fix some of these other problems that are negatively impacting water quality out there. So we do daily sampling at our beaches, which is kind of rare. A lot of beaches just do weekly sampling. So we go out every day. Our interns go out about 6 a.m. They leave our office and drive around and collect all these samples. And then we notify the public on water quality so they know if it's safe to swim or not. So we notify the Cleveland Metro Parks, and then they post the signage. So this is Edgewater Beach, Villa Angela Beach. This is Euclid Creek. It's a pretty creek, and for the most part, the biological metrics meet water quality standards, but the E. coli's bad. We've got problems with E. coli out here. So these are what our graphs look like for our E. coli. On the left, you've got the geomean. So we have like a 90-day rolling average geomean is what you're looking at. So geometric mean. So just think of it as an average. So if you're below 126, you're good. That's the first of the two recreational criteria that's set by the Ohio EPA. So Edgewater Beach is meeting the geomean criteria. It's meeting the second criteria is called the statistical threshold value. So it's just basically if your result is above 410 live E. coli cells in a 100 ml sample. So if you're above 410, we don't want that to happen more than 10% of the time. That's the right graph. So it's what percent of the time are we above that 410? So we had a little heavy rains. This is 2023 data. It's had some it's pretty similar year to year. So heavy rains early in May. So we were in exceedance of that criteria for a portion of the season. But for the most part, Edgewater Beach is meeting its water quality criteria. Villa Angela Beach has been meeting its geomean criteria very well, but our percentage of days above that 410 is above that 10% that we're shooting for. We're floating more around 20. So that's not good. And it's because of this dirty next door neighbor that it has. So when it rains, the elevated E. coli from Euclid Creek essentially forms like a little cloud, like it envelops that beach. So you've got a high E. coli laden discharge from Euclid Creek, and the plume ends up in Villa Angela and Euclid Beach. So we've got some wet weather problems out at that beach. That's about all I put together for everyone. I want to talk to you about how to stay connected with us. If you want to find more information, you can go to NEORSD.org to check out our website. If you Google NEORSD and environmental, that'll take you to our environmental services webpage, and you can find a story map that has all of our different studies that we've ever put together and all of our results. So you can see like what fish we catch in what creek and things like that. So I invite you to check that out. We have an awesome podcast called the Clean Water Works podcast. It's put on by Donna Friedman and Mike Uva. So I listen to that one on Spotify, but you can find that wherever you listen to your podcasts. And then we've got a huge social media presence put on by John Gonzalez in our CCR department. So it's hysterical. Check it out. If you don't already check that out, I highly recommend you look into that. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for also including the connection page. I would recommend the Clean Water Works podcast as well. Before we do take any questions, I just wanted to let everyone know that this speaker series we will continue to promote it through the CRWP website, social media, and our e-newsletter. So if you're interested in attending future presentations, be sure to check those out. We have 2 more this month. And then additionally, if you have any topic recommendations or if you yourself would like to be a speaker, please email me. I'll drop my email in the chat in just a moment. But let's start addressing questions. So we have one, and you did kind of mention this about you'll inform like the Cleveland Metro Parks and they'll post a sign. But when E. coli levels are too high, what exactly do you do to inform the local community that may be using that water for recreation?
We're really active in that. So we're part of a couple of, we report through multiple entities. So we work with the USGS. They have a website called the USGS Nowcast. We actually have a grant that funds part of our beach monitoring program through the Ohio Department of Health. So our data goes to their website, which is called Beach Guard. So we're on the Beach Guard website. Our sewer district website, NEORSD.org, has a beach section. So if you Google NEORSD and beaches, you'll get to that. So we put it on that website. We do and news channel 5, I think. I can't remember if it's 5 or 3. It's one of the news channels. So we put that out to the public there. We're shooting out an email blast to the Ohio Department of Health and Cleveland Metro Parks on a daily basis. And Cleveland Metro Parks also posts signs at all the major beach entrances that show. So the sign's either going to be green or red with a description of what that means. And we're not just looking at E. coli out there. We're also looking for harmful algal blooms, which have not been a problem at our beaches since I think 2018 was the last big bloom we had. There've been some there's been some work by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to kind of teach farmers how to apply phosphorus properly, and we haven't seen the harmful algal blooms. They do hit the western basin of Lake Erie still, not as heavily as they were, I think, but we haven't seen them out here in the central basin. But we do have an in-place SON station at Edgewater Beach where we monitor for harmful algal blooms, and we monitor for harmful algal blooms with physical grabs at all of our sites if we think it's necessary, if we see visual signs of any harmful algal blooms.
Awesome. And I guess a kind of personal question that piggybacks off of that. I saw that we had a lot of people say they were from Cuyahoga County, though we obviously have a lot of people more on the east side too. Do you happen to know off the top of your head, um, like which, I guess, recreational area, like a public beach, might be more pristine in our location?
I only really know the two that we sample. Would
Okay,
probably be
gotcha.
good. I know that Huntington Beach is used quite a bit, and I know that Edgewater beaches are. I think they're all really nice beaches, but not during wet weather. You know, like Villa Angela is a beautiful beach, but like I said, 20% of the time we're above that 410, and that's going to be after wet weather. So, yeah, Edgewater Beach is a beautiful beach in the city within the city of Cleveland Reach. That's a great beach.
All right, gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so another question. I know you're not like a fish biologist, but we have a question about why stock the Cuyahoga with non-native species fish. I know you mentioned brook trout and the freshwater sturgeon, which I believe those are both native. I don't remember if you mentioned
Yeah, I
non-native.
didn't say anything about the trout, and I have nothing to do with stocking fish. The Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District has nothing to do with stocking fish that are non-native. So so I can't answer that question because we don't do that. We just do the surveys. We just
No
say if they're present.
worries.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So sorry, I can't. Yeah.
No
And
worries
that's
there.
something that comes up in conversation with like when I talked to Ryan Trimboth about the mussel stuff. I think that irks him. You know,
Yeah.
if anybody's stocking non-natives, that's a sensitive subject to a lot of people in this field.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm sorry I can't get into it
No, I
anymore.
believe the Ohio Department of Natural Resources is responsible for that.
Yeah.
But all right. Another question we have. I understand translocating fish above dams, but above natural waterfalls. Why would that be the case?
Well, because they were present above that natural waterfall before we wiped them out. So usually we're doing that where there was some sort of pollutant that totally decimated the fish community. And so they theoretically, historically that waterfall may or may not have always been there. So you would have had access where there was passage. And so you had a healthy fish community upstream of that waterfall. But then we built some nasty sewage treatment plant that wasn't maintained properly, or we had some other discharge, like an industry was tied in improperly. So those problems have been fixed now in many regions, and we're seeing improved water quality. It has the capacity to be restored to where it was. And so we want to restore it back to where it was, just to give nature a little boost back. Again, we're not trying to move fish to where they don't belong or to where they never were. We're just trying to fix the mistakes of generations past.
Thank you. That makes sense to me. I hope that answered the question. We have another one regarding so how does the regional sewer district participate in wastewater monitoring for human pathogens such as like COVID? Do you take
We
data
do
on
have a
that?
COVID monitoring program. So we were part of a grant with, I believe it was with Case Western Reserve University. And we were finding that you can use DNA analytical techniques like quantitative PCR to look at viruses in our wastewater. So we were able to track like the COVID DNA and how it went up. I wasn't directly involved. I collected some samples for that program, but I was not directly involved. But that is one way. So we can use quantitative PCR is a DNA-based analytical tool where you can detect the concentration of very specific sequences of DNA in a water quality sample. So you can use that for what we call eDNA or environmental DNA. You can look at fish species or mussel species or anything, any bacteria, whatever, based on DNA that's found in the water sample. And we can do that same thing with viruses and pathogens. Now, from a regulatory standpoint, like the COVID sequence isn't like a regulatory standard. But we were working with Case Western Reserve University as part of a grant to study COVID during that time. So it's a possibility, and it's definitely something. We've got a very advanced analytical services group. So it's amazing to have that and to have those resources. And so we're able to assist other agencies with that sort of work. But for the most part, we just use E. coli as what's called a fecal indicator bacteria. And so that's the standard that's been set by the US EPA is to use E. coli. And if E. coli is elevated, that means very likely there are other human pathogens in the water. And so that's the gold standard that we use. But we have other analytical tools if we want to do more advanced projects, and we have worked on that in the past.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, it looks like we have one more that when it's still associated with the kind of letting the community know if there's an issue in water quality. If people are like recreating in rivers and creeks, how are they supposed to, I guess, know to stay away from the pollution or just kind of we have to educate people to stay away after like rain events?
Well, you can check out our website and check out that story map. If you live in a region and you typically tend to recreate in a particular stream, you can look at the Ohio EPA publishes all of their results. So they're doing the same work that we're doing. We are using their methods. So you can look at the Ohio EPA study to see are there water quality problems or issues in my stream that I want to recreate in. The Ohio Integrated Report is a really good reference for that. So that looks at they look at all the major watersheds in Ohio in that report and give a general summary. And a lot of that they cover recreational use in that report as well. But like I said, if you Google NEORSD and environmental, you can find our my supervisor Seth and our GIS group put together this awesome story map that has all of our reports, all of our water chemistry data, and just in general though, after a rain event, if the water looks dirty, it's probably a little dirty. The more urban a stream is, the more problems it's going to have. If there's lots of streets, there's lots of sewers running up and down those streets. So just be aware that after a wet weather event or a rain event, which is probably not when you're going to be recreating in a stream anyway. You're probably going to be out there in dry weather, low flow, clear conditions where you can see down to the bottom. But in general, if it's an urban stream and it looks muddy and dirty, it's probably muddy and dirty.
All right. Well, I do not see any more questions, so I think we can wrap this up unless something pops up while I'm still saying this. But thank you again, Dr. Soehnlen. I really appreciate your time as well as your dedication to educating others on the importance of clean water. I want to thank those of you who attended too, who are still on. Again, you can expect an email from me sometime soon, which will include a link to the recording and a short survey. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Soehnlen, and thank you to the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. Have a
Thanks for
great,
having me, Maggie. You take care.
thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.